honestly making sleep a priority. And then
Mm.
here's a big one that I see a lot of us as parents sort of moving away from. And that is to have a sleep routine, a pre-sleep routine. So they say
Mm-hmm.
you and I should kind of start dimming the lights like an hour before, turn off screens, and do mindless activities. I like this name. They call it piddle. I don't know exactly. I'm thinking piddle might mean like put away your laundry. I don't know. Something
Oh,
kind
I've
of,
never heard of that.
something easy peasy, not kind of relaxing and mindless, that you don't normally do when you're running around during the
Mm.
day. And don't read work things, just read like
Yes.
an easy novel, nothing too, depressing or
Stimulating. Yeah.
scary or anything like, basically just help you drift off if you like.
Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Hello, parents. This is Dana Kay here with another edition of the Soaring Child podcast. I think back to when my son was in the peak of his ADHD symptoms and I was absolutely exhausted, but not for the reason you're probably thinking. It was because he couldn't sleep. And when he couldn't sleep, I couldn't sleep. And so if any of you listeners out here today have a child that is struggling falling asleep or staying asleep, and that's affecting your sleep, then you definitely do not want to miss out on today's episode. My guest is a mum of two who has been a practicing child and family social worker for over 25 years. She has personally helped over 20,000 families all over the world gently teach their children how to fall asleep and fall back asleep without leaving them to cry it out alone. She is the author of the best-selling book, The Sleep Lady's Good Night, Sleep Tight. She started training gentle sleep coaches internationally in 2010 and has appeared as a child sleep expert on numerous magazines, newspapers, and television programs including Dr. Phil, Today, and Good Morning America. Now it's time to welcome Kim West to the Soaring Child. Hi, Kim. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Donna. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, I was really excited when we were just recently in Utah together about getting you on the podcast. So I'm so glad that we could make it work. I am missing Utah, I have to say. It was a beautiful, beautiful place to visit, and we had lots of fun.
We did indeed. I
Sure.
agree.
But we are not here to talk about Utah today. We are here to talk about sleep, and you are the go-to person for sleep. And so super excited to dive in because we all know kids with ADHD, they struggle with sleep, and it's a big, big thing. And so I'm sure there are many, many listeners out there that have that same struggle with their kids.
Yep, absolutely. It's what is it? 25 to 30% of neurotypical children have a behavioral sleep problem. So that's
neurotypical. That's not even,
exactly.
yeah.
Yep.
So
over 50% in non-neurotypical.
There you go, which is huge. And so that's why like bringing you on the podcast, I think is going to be so beneficial for listeners out there. Now, let's just talk about a little bit about the mechanics of sleep first. Okay. So what happens to our bodies and our brains when we sleep?
Yeah. So I love that question because a lot of people think, although I think it's changing, which I'm excited about. You hit the pillow, and that's it. Like there's not a lot of activity happening. The brain is just resting. When actually the brain is doing really critical things. Three in particular that I like to focus on. One, and this is true for us as adults and our children and babies, is that we are working on our immune system, right? And largely while we're sleeping. Right. So it kind of makes sense. You get really sleep deprived and you feel like you're more likely to get sick. It's harder and takes longer to heal. That's because of what's happening at night. So important. The other thing is when our children, I won't include myself, when we are growing 21 and under, this is the time at night when our body is producing and secreting growth hormones to see how our children grow at the amazing rate that they do. Yes, you'd have to be significantly sleep deprived for a very long time for your growth to be reduced, or they call it retarded, which I'm surprised they haven't come up with a new name for that. But so I don't want you to worry about that. However, if you have concerns about your child's growth and your pediatrician does, then I would be looking at sleep too, and making sure that your child's getting enough sleep and enough good quality sleep. And the third really big one, and this is true for us as adults too, it is when we are working on memory retention, storage, and organization.
Wow.
So not to mention short-term learning, right? So this is the foundation of learning, right? I have an experience, I file it away in the brain, and then, the next day I have a similar experience that reminds me of that experience I had yesterday in my, neurons. I have to go into my brain, find that file, pull it out, read the notes. Oh, yes, right. And then go back, right? I'm really doing like an abstract metaphor.
Oh, look, I think it's totally fascinating. And, I
actually usually use the example of a toddler who you put in the high chair and, they figure out, I throw my sippy cup over the edge. It disappears. It makes a noise. I make a noise. My parent or caregiver picks it up. It reappears. They have an exchange with me. Right. And then, oh, interesting. Put that in the folder. Yeah. And then if I've had a good night's sleep and a good nap and I'm having lunch and I get that cup again, I'll be able to go find that file and be able to experiment. What happens if I throw it over on the other side? But when I'm really tired, it's like, I think I remember there was something with the sippy cup. Can't find the folder. Can't read my notes. Forget it. And we often also, when we're overtired, don't eat well either, So our short-term memory is definitely impaired. You see this with our own when we get sleep deprived attention, right? Like, have you ever had that experience when you're tired? I was supposed to call somebody, but I can't remember who it is. And it's like on the edge of my brain. Right. And I knew that just an hour ago, I thought, I got to remember. And now I don't. Now, most, parents who are very sleep deprived are like, oh my gosh, Kim, I've been feeling like that for months, sometimes years.
Yes.
And so same for our children. And then imagine, they're going to school and having to learn every day, all day. And it makes it much harder for them to do that when they're sleep deprived.
Oh, yeah. I can totally see that. And the fact that you said it affects our attention. And, the listeners out there, we are dealing with children that have problems with attention. They have an attention deficit. So when you have a kid that's not sleeping well, it affects it even more. And so, it's fascinating.
I would even add a few more things. I mean, I know I'm, biased that, sleep is everything kind of thing. Like for you, the gut is everything, but the gut also affects sleep and it's all connected, right? Connected. It also affects our mood and our ability to self-regulate, which is also an issue with kids with ADHD. There's plenty of adults that don't have ADHD that have problems with emotional regulation. So add on to that, poor health, poor sleep, and we tend to be more impulsive, more accidents. If you have a teenager who's driving, more car accidents. We tend to be more negative, even feeling more depressed, more anxious. And these are things, especially with adolescents, that they already have a higher risk for or are experiencing. And so this adds to it.
Yeah. So I think listeners, we can take from that sleep's critical. It exacerbates ADHD symptoms, and not just ADHD symptoms. It exacerbates so many other things as well. That growth, that repair of the brain and the body is so important, and happens while we're sleeping. So you developed a gentle sleep training method. Can you explain to the listeners how we're going a little bit back to when they're younger, and it can start there. That's the thing. Like, bad sleep habits start when the child is younger, and so can you just explain to us a little bit how this method is different from, say, the traditional cried out methods?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, don't say any of this in judgment. Parenting is hard. I'm not perfect. I'm sure you're not perfect as a parent. I always joked with my kids, my job is for you to have as few sessions in therapy as possible. But you're going to have some, and I might help you pay for it too. So definitely no judgment. We're all doing the best we can. And desperate times require desperate actions when we're in the thick of a family crisis. That could be, in my world, a kid's not sleeping for weeks, months, years. And in your world, a child who's really suffering with ADHD and is also probably not sleeping well.
Correct. Yes.
So I'm a licensed family therapist, and I know that one of the cornerstones of emotional mental health is to create a secure attachment with your child so that your baby knows that they can trust you to keep them safe and provide for their needs before they are able to take care of themselves and express themselves. And when I had my first daughter, the only thing available it's really called graduated extinction. In America, it's been popularized with the name Ferberizing because Dr. Richard Ferber had the first sleep training book out there. He basically said, put your baby in the crib, awake after a soothing routine, leave the room, but you can go check on them in increments and, make it a longer and longer time until they finally learn how to put themselves to sleep. And then after that, Weisbluth came out with basically saying, don't go in at all. And it will be more successful. And the reason why it's more successful to not go in at all is because we, the parents, can't mess it up when we go in by I feel badly. I abandoned him. Maybe he's starving, whatever it is. He's cried for 30 minutes. I'm just going to pick him up and rock him to sleep or give him a bottle or nurse him to sleep or whatever. And you do that repeatedly enough. And unfortunately, we can train our children to cry 30 minutes until you go do that thing you do. And so I decided that maybe there could be something in between. I was trying to think, again, with my family therapist hat, it's sort of like how I think about tantrums. Like, I never, to me, thought it made a lot of sense to put a child in a chair when they're having a meltdown and say, now go figure it out. I'm going to go into the other room. I wasn't sure always. I'm not saying there's not a time and a place to give a child some moments to regulate. But a lot of kids, particularly kids who are maybe more sensitive and on a continuum of neurotypical, that they have trouble really winding themselves down.
Yep.
And so I thought, well, couldn't that be true for going to sleep too? And so I developed a method where you stay with them while they learn, you do less and less and move away as they incorporate the skill themselves of putting themselves to sleep. And I started, helping families devise a custom plan for their family. And then I would coach them through the whole process. And I found that they ended up being successful, as I'm sure you see that in the programs with the families you work with, is that the families that I go from A to Z with, it's like a 99% success rate.
Wow.
After, of course, we've ruled out underlying medical conditions, we're making sure the child's, growing healthy, we've checked all those boxes and is safe.
Yeah.
If we have like a clean behavioral issue, it can change. And so I tell families, and by the way, if you're a listener and you're like, oh no, I let my kid cry, does that mean like I damaged them? And I just want you to know that if your child went to sleep quickly and they didn't have to cry hours and days in a row for them to learn to put themselves to sleep, I'm sure you're fine. Yeah. Right. And I'm sure your child's fine. I just want parents to have choices, right? It shouldn't be cry it out or suffer for weeks, months, years. There should be options that then we can match to our family philosophy and our child's temperament, and probably most important, what we can follow through with consistently.
Yeah, I love that. And that's, exactly how I look at it as well. Sort of like there are treatment options for ADHD and medication, and really that's it. But I'm giving them that other option of like that natural approach. And so I really love that philosophy, Kim. So you touched a little bit on underlying conditions. And I think that that's a really good segue into just having a little bit of a discussion about that. From your experience, what have you found to be some of the most common, or not most common, but some of the underlying conditions that may be contributing to sleep issues?
I was thinking about 4 most common ones. And I know that there are more, and I've certainly worked with families where there was more, but they're not the most common. But the most common that I see is asthma, and mostly the medication that treats asthma that also often has steroids in it. By the way, just like an overarching tip or hint is that any disease or conditions that affect breathing will affect sleep. Because there is, that when we are in REM sleep, our body, which is the dreaming sleep, our body is paralyzed. Obviously, we're breathing and our heart's working and our brain's working, but we're not having big movements in our body because it's to protect ourselves, right? So you don't act out your dreams and hurt yourself. It's to keep you asleep and not hurt yourself. So imagine though, if your airway is compromised and you're in a paralyzed state while you're sleeping, and you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain, right? Your body will wake up. It will snore. It will wake up. It will move. So that's why you'll often see, anything to do with breathing affects sleep. Okay.
Yes, and you've got me thinking on a tangent here, and I probably should stop doing this, but I always throw my husband under the bus. Let's hope that he doesn't listen to this episode. But just when you're explaining that in the snoring and then the moving, and that's exactly what he does, and I'm like, I think I need to send him to a sleep specialist.
Yeah. So it's pretty darn common, it can be 15% in children. So just skipping to obstructive sleep apnea, right? Which means that the airway is impeded, oftentimes with children, by enlarged tonsils and adenoids. It can also be with kids, obesity and adults.
Mm-hmm.
And also as you get older, your muscle tone loosens in your neck. And if you have a recessed jaw, so that then your jaw drops back, closes the airway. Right. So that will cause your body to wake up. So most common signs of obstructive sleep apnea, like top 3, mouth breathing or snoring, restless sleep, like all the blankets, pillows end up on the ground. You got to get them back up, or you go into the room and you're like, oh my gosh, like the bed has to be remade every single morning. Right. And the third one is sweating during sleep. So particularly you'll see that in the head. Do you need all of these things? No. You really kind of only need one, but it helps if you have several others. Like also if you see a history for a child of frequent ear infections, allergies, congestion, reflux, again, inflammation, which you know all about, and things that affect breathing. So asthma, you'll often see that too. And going back quickly, if anybody is on some of the medications that our kids and adults take for asthma that is to prevent asthma, it says on there that it shouldn't prevent sleep problems, but boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, have I had parents go to their doctor and say, can we move the dosage earlier? Can we reduce it? Can we split it up? And bam, the child's able to sleep. The parents are able to sleep too. And even though they say right on it that that's not going to, create alertness like steroids do. The other one is reflux. So, we all reflux, but if you actually have GERD, that can cause you to wake up. And of course, you're going to have most of that burning when you lay down at night. Children and adults who have GERD wake up refluxing. And it can cause early rising and, upset stomach, which again, then they don't want to eat, and it's that
when they're hungry, then they don't sleep. And
Exactly. And then the other one we're seeing a huge rise in my communities of coaches internationally. So this is not just an American issue. And by the way, the behavioral sleep problems are not just an American issue either. As I was told many, many years ago that it was, is restless leg syndrome, which the thing you have to get tested for is ferritin. It's not just your iron levels, but ferritin, which is the storage of iron. And oftentimes we do need to be treated. And guess what? They often tell you to do. You got to improve your diet. So you can absorb iron and you can store it. And then I would just add on another one that also has to do with gut, is eczema. So eczema is the itch that rashes. So your children may be itchy, but you don't know why. Now, of course, that could look like restless leg syndrome also. So you see how important going to your work, Donna, the gut is in all of these things. Now, of course, enlarged tonsils and adenoids, they may have to be removed. Just like ear tubes sometimes have to be put into children if you can't get inflammation down in the body enough, or get allergies under control enough, so that a child can breathe, so they can have quality sleep, and that will help their behavior and help them in school.
Kim, you've just set off a light bulb in my brain right now, because it all ties together. And don't worry, listeners, we will definitely be getting to some of Kim's top tips on what you can do if you first work out that it's not an underlying issue. But it is really common that kids with ADHD have low iron and a ferritin issue. And so this could also be connected to their sleep. But also when they don't sleep, it exacerbates ADHD symptoms. Sleep apnea ADHD is often misdiagnosed, and it's actually a sleep apnea issue. So this
Correct.
is just, oh, we've just opened this
Oh, yeah.
floodgate of all this information. And so if any of this is resonating with the listeners, definitely you want to be investigating it further. And so, Kim, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure you've put that light bulb moment off in a lot of people's brain.
Yeah, maybe it would be helpful because it used to be that, pre-pandemic when I would go out and speak, the things that people would, drive hours for besides, obviously want a solution to their child's sleep. I've had people drive hours and call and email me to say, thank you. You helped us figure out that our child had sleep apnea. We kept thinking it was a behavioral sleep problem. We thought they were just a picky eater. We thought they had bad behavior because we were bad parents, right? All of those kinds of things. So I bet that when I get back out in speaking now, I think the next thing that will be like that is restless leg syndrome. So I did not know. You've just taught me something about that connection, with ADHD. You wonder what comes first, right?
Totally. Well, I think, but I think that it's all, which is first, the chicken or the egg, but it can be a combination of things as well.
For sure.
What happens is people think it may be a sleep issue or they keep getting into this vicious cycle of bad sleep habits. And then even if they fix the underlying issue, you still got to correct the bad sleep habit. So let's go there. Let's go to that sleep hygiene, what parents can be doing to really, really help with that good sleep hygiene.
So good sleep hygiene, we just need a better name for that. Make it a little more fun and playful.
Yes. What is that? Let's come up with that.
Hygiene sounds no, but I need to work on that. We probably could get some of the kids in your program to come up with a good name that they could get.
You should. You could coin a phrase. You could coin a phrase.
Let's do that together. And it's not, it's just like with a family changing their eating habits. It's hard to change our habits as humans. It's just the nature of the beast. But in general, we are supposed to go to sleep and wake up around the same time. Now, obviously, children need more sleep and it starts to get less and less until it's about 8 hours at 18. But boy, it's a lot of hours before that.
Can we just quickly segue to that? Could you give a guide of what, what's the average for, say, the toddler and then the 4 to 6 year old and then do you have those?
I would say if I'm going to do big broad strokes instead of going beep, beep, beep like that, it is from probably 6 months old to, and we'll just forget naps for now. But 6 months old to 18 at night sleep goes from 11 and a half hours to 8.5 hours.
Okay.
That's not a big range.
No, it isn't.
For 18 years of life. And we all know how few teenagers are getting 8 hours of sleep at night and how few adults are getting 8 hours, at minimum 7 hours. So it's an amazing amount. And then factor in naps up until the average age to stop napping is 4.
Yes.
That's the average, right? And these are averages. But the bell curve is pretty fat for those sleep averages. So it's a lot of sleep. And the people who say I do okay on 5 hours, the studies do not, say that that's true. They are suffering in other ways that they may not be aware of. Health. I mean, it affects your heart.
Oh, it affects
sleep apnea. If you have sleep apnea, it affects your heart. Yeah, it does
Mm.
can do damage to the
Well,
muscles of your heart. So yeah.
yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. So let's go back to
Okay, yeah,
sleep.
sorry.
No, sleep. Uh,
Hygiene.
I know, I was trying to come up with a different
Sleep.
name.
Yeah. Healthy recipe, something. Sleep biome. I don't know. Okay, so go to sleep and wake up around the same time. You really should
Check.
try not to, wiggle around with that by more than an hour.
Hmm.
However, I will say a caveat would be for teenagers. They've now saying we should let them sleep in on the weekends.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but just know that there's like a little bit of a sleep hangover on Monday.
Mm.
So they have to work, so you almost want on Sunday to not sleep till noon, maybe
Mm.
sleep till 10, so that you can go to sleep at a reasonable time on Sunday night to be ready for school on Monday,
Sure.
right? But in general, we have this circadian rhythm that, I have to argue about this with parents in certain countries in Europe where they want to stay up late with their kids, especially their little kids, and have them, adjust and sleep in. And unfortunately, our kids really can't do that or don't do it well until 7 or 8 years of age. And what I mean by that is that they are not good at, oh, I stayed up late because we went to a family barbecue. And instead of going to bed at 8, I went to bed at 11.
Mm.
And therefore, I will now sleep in the morning. So a lot of 3-year-olds, that won't work. They
Oh,
go to
it
bed late.
never does.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, this is the pros and cons of the internet. All
Mm.
you need is like one child who does it. And
Yeah.
then they have the best press agent, right? And
Yeah.
everybody's like, but I want that. I want
Yeah.
my child to do that. And so I'm like, if your child's doing that at 3, 4, 5, well, then just say thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sleep angels. But don't expect that because the science actually doesn't support that because, their sleep architecture is developing.
Mm.
So going to bed around the same time. And then, honestly, making sleep a priority. And then
Mm.
here's a big one that I see a lot of us as parents sort of moving away from. And that is to have a sleep routine, a pre-sleep routine. So they
Mm-hmm.
say you and I should kind of start dimming the lights like an hour before, turn off screens, and do mindless activities. I like this name. They call it piddle. I don't know exactly. I'm thinking piddle might mean like put away your laundry. I don't know. Something
Oh,
kind
I've never
of,
heard of that.
something easy peasy, not kind of relaxing and mindless, that you don't normally do when you're running around during the
Mm.
day. And don't read work things, just read like
Yes.
an easy novel, nothing too, depressing or
Stimulating. Yeah.
scary or anything like, basically just help you drift off. If you like meditating, yoga, having a routine actually helps tell the brain to start secreting melatonin, the drowsy making hormone, start getting ready for sleep. So 2 things tell the brain to secrete melatonin: darkness and soothing bedtime routines, or they call them social cues,
Mm-hmm.
right? Same for us, right? So I'm not just talking about kids. So I really think that going before the time before our kids go to bed is a great time to connect.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to talk about stressful things with the child, I would do it earlier, like after dinner or before dinner or during dinner when everyone's being supportive and a caring family or whatever it is. Some kids, it's better not to like unload about a serious conversation right before bedtime, particularly if you have a child who's a worrier,
Yeah.
which I know a lot of kids with ADHD, they have a hard time shutting that active mind off and they may be worrying about the next day.
Mm.
So save those things for earlier. And having that, you could do, 2 things you'd like to have happen tomorrow or one great thing about your day today. And I mean, I didn't do this with my kids as teenagers, but up until middle school, we read together. And we had fun doing that and talking about sometimes the illustrations or the story, or we would play some kind of a quiet sort of easy game. Jigsaw puzzles, they say, are very calming.
We my kids like to do the adult coloring in books because they're coloring in the little squares, and that's like meditating. Or the adult dot to dots. There's like 1,500 dots, and they're going dot, dot, dot,
exactly.
dot.
Zentangle, when you do all like the little twirl. Yep. Exactly.
So you've said that we want to go to bed and wake up at the same time. About an hour before sleep, we want to start just doing mind soothing activities, and we want to dim the lights. Yep. Okay. What else?
Ideally, can you remove the phones from your kids' rooms? Particularly your teenagers. I would talk to them about cyber security and what happens when you post stuff online, and just like protect your brain, your body, your person, because you can't take that stuff back, and a lot of stuff's happening late at night after we say goodnight to our teenagers. I've learned myself with having teenage girls. So it's just like, okay, we're not having any phones at the dinner table.
Yes.
Some of those practices where we're teaching them about their brains, and so that kind of connects with technology. So, technology is not going anywhere, and our kids are going to be using the phone. So I'm not saying, oh, don't ever let your kids use a phone, but it is helpful to talk to them about the brain and about the light that comes from a screen that goes into the eyeball and into the brain and tells the brain, well, we better stay awake because it's awake time. It doesn't know. It's not seeing darkness and social cues. And so it doesn't secrete melatonin. So we really, and that is a real thing, right? That's something you can really tell your children. It's not about good behavior. It's like, this is making it so your brain can't go to sleep. It's putting the brain on alert. And if it gets tired enough, the brain starts secreting alerting hormones. Cortisol is one of them, which makes it really hard to go to sleep and stay asleep. So I like apps that dim the light. There's screens that you could put on it, blue light blocking glasses when they're doing their homework. They definitely help. What else? I'd have their vitamin D levels checked too. That's an important part. And then just like another little tidbit that I know isn't really part of sleep, but part of the therapist in me and knows about these kids stressing out about social media and what's happening online. I really encourage parents to talk to their kids about what they're watching and looking at on Instagram.
No, I know.
And you have to sometimes start with yourself. Like, oh, I remember, when my kids were teenagers, the girls were all wearing these t-shirts with these super provocative statements and not nice things about themselves that they would wear. And so we would talk about that. Well, what do you think about that? Or I'd say, wow, I saw this thing that this person in my network did. And I found that upsetting, and just being able to have a conversation so that it's not just about, oh, I have to hide that I'm looking at something from my parents, but instead opening that up. So that they can talk about all, because they're looking at all this stuff no matter what we say or do.
I know. Well, look, we could do a whole separate episode on that, and we probably should, because I think it's a very, very important topic, especially, with the technology that's around these days. Now, do you want to tell me a little bit about some ways that you work with families? What are some of the ways that that parents can work with you, and how you help families?
So most of the families that I work with and the services that I have are for children 0 to 6 years of age. Although I have trained some of my coaches to work with kids up to 10 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
And basically after, we've gotten treated anything underlying medical with the family's pediatrician or healthcare provider. And what we're left with is a behavioral sleep problem, which is very common, right? All the way up to, 18. Then we create a customized plan and then coach the family through that. And with older children, meaning 6 and up, sometimes they might need to have the family work with the sleep coach and a therapist to teach some of those self-calming techniques.
Yep. Okay.
So I do have a book.
Yes.
I have actually another one coming out. I have the Sleep Ladies Goodnight Sleep Tight. It's behind me back there. And that's for 6 months to 6 years. I have my new book coming out in March for newborns, the Sleep Ladies Gentle Newborn Sleep Guide, and then one in the fall on newborns and twins. And then I have a workbook on children with special needs.
Oh, that's fantastic, Kim. Congratulations on the upcoming books. It sounds like you've been very, very busy on that. Now, I like the idea of that sleep workbook for kids with challenges. I think that would be really, really useful for the listeners out there. Now, I think the biggest takeaway that I have gotten from this is that after you've checked underlying issues that are contributing to sleep, what will be left over is probably a behavioral sleep issue. And that's where someone like Kim can really help break that cycle. But it all starts right from birth. It's setting the right sleep hygiene, the right sleep tactics, giving the kids the right skills in order to be able to sleep, put themselves to sleep. And, I know a lot of listeners out there will have 2 children. And so, starting that with the young ones is really, really helpful. What sort of some just final top tips that you can give to parents to just, really set them up to support and protect their child's sleep?
Well, I think they could follow some of the tips I said earlier about regulating bedtime and wake up time.
Yep. And
know that sleep, I like Dr. Weisbluff saying sleep begets sleep. So for a young child who's still napping, naps, children who are well napped will sleep better at night. And if you're having a child who's waking up at 5 a.m., putting them to bed earlier will help, not later. Like things that are not logical are important to know. And also that there's light at the end of the tunnel. That sleep can get better. And I'm super biased for listeners out there whose kids are in beds with sleep problems. I do find that the gentler methods tend to work better than the I'm going to leave and return you or lock the door. And so know that, that I've helped thousands of families with kids in beds and that it can be better. And you don't have to suffer alone.
Oh, well, that's fantastic, Kim. I think that's a perfect note to end this episode on. I really, really enjoyed you joining me today and sharing your knowledge and your experience with all of our listeners. And I think that we had some great takeaways there and some light bulb moments for sure. Please tell listeners where they can find and follow you online.
You can go to sleeplady.com, both on Instagram and Pinterest and Facebook and YouTube and soon TikTok.
Soon TikTok. I love it. Yes, I've been convinced to go onto TikTok too. And it's an interesting platform that we're really stepping outside of our comfort zone. That's for sure. Well, Kim, I can't wait to see you on TikTok. I love the name Sleep Lady. And next time we talk, I hope we have a new name for sleep hygiene. Listeners, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.